All right, now we're on. This is a good chapter. They're all good chapters. So I think I've got it figured out that after this week we have 3 more weeks, and then we'll do one final week on just like a review. What have we learned, or what has resonated with us? And that'll be you talking. We'll turn the camera that direction. That will be November 14th is the last Sunday we will do this, because on November 20th I will be in New York. I'm flying up on the 19th, my son Ransom and I, and we're going to meet my son Schaefer in New York. He lives in Manhattan, and a bunch of his friends, and we're going to spend Friday there. He's going to take Friday off. Saturday, we're going to take the trains up to New Haven, Connecticut. My daughter's up there, and her boyfriend's a coach for the Yale football team, and it's the Yale-Harvard football game. So I just bought tickets. There's going to be 6 of us going, and then a bunch are going to be going to restaurants and watching the game there. Then we'll just all get together for a dinner. So it'll be a fun day. And then we'll spend Sunday back in New York just walking around. He lives about 2 miles from Central Park. So it's a cool place to be. And then early Monday morning, Ransom and I fly back because he has to work. And we have then Thanksgiving break. So it's a good way to end this. I'm all excited because I haven't traveled just because of COVID stuff. I haven't felt like it's been the responsible thing to do, but I finally feel okay doing it. I've got every foreign substance in my body, including COVID. So whatever needs to come my way, it's already been here. So we'll get done on the 14th. All that to say we'll get done on the 14th. Just bought my tickets, our airline tickets yesterday, and got tickets to the game. What now? Yeah. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Should be fun.
So have you thought anything more about the next course?
I haven't thought anything more at all. It was homecoming week. I have announced more games this week. In the last week, I've announced 2 football games, 4 slip and slide games, 4, what else did we do? Ultimately, we play baseball, but you do kickball. So it's kickball. And instead, what you do is the bases are pools, and then you put plastic between the bases and turn on the sprinklers in the football field and then put soap down. So kids can just jump from bases. They're going around the base. They can just jump and slide the whole way. It is so much fun. And I'm the announcer. So I'm just ragging on kids. Oh, it's so much fun. You ought to see what they do, too. I mean, like the kid who won the thing, we went into extra, the bottom of whatever, the 4th inning, and the kid coming from third, he came around 2nd or 3rd, and then just landed on his behind and just slid, smiling the whole way. And I thought, this is so much fun. And then all these kids are out there, and you're just giving them a hard time. And so but it's been a lot of talking this week. So.
But anyway, Kent's going to do, I think, the life of David, right? And in the sermons, I think I read.
Oh yes, he is.
And I really love to study the Old
Well.
Testament.
So Shirley's saying you're doing the life of David, Kent, because he's the only person that watches this. So don't screw it up. There we go. Now we're set.
It's a great.
You like David, huh? You want your sons to be like David? That's a setup.
I don't have girls.
That's when it's funny when we teach kind of moralism from the Old Testament. What's that? You do? I did not know that.
But anyway, I have girls, and I do have grandsons, and that's.
Any of them named David?
No, I do have a son-in-law, David. I love the name.
All right. We have some Davids in the family.
No, they stayed with the family name.
All right.
Daddy's name. So.
Very good. Well, let's pray,
Okay.
and we'll do this. So, Father, you know our situations, even as Shirley's just talked about her son. Boy, we got a lot of pain, even in this room. A lot of things we deal with, and we know Jesus. And so we really do have an understanding on how things work. We have peace in the midst of pain. We trust that you are working. Then we think about those people who don't know you, who are just kind of on their own. I read a story about a guy who just made his lunch, set out his clothes for the next day, and then killed himself. And his family's trying to make peace with this whole idea of why would somebody do it. There's so much going on below the surface that we don't see. And so even today, as Kent is preaching, and as people come in for the service, may we be aware that man, we're a banged up crew. And there's a lot of pain that we don't know about. And so meet us, meet others. As we even talked about last week, as as the death and resurrection of Jesus has begun to affect the entire universe, moving people's hearts as your Spirit drives them back to the cross. And so even as we speak now, thank you for Lewis and his faithfulness over the years. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, this is a good chapter. It's called Let's Pretend. And so he gives two stories. And the story's Beauty and the Beast, you know the story. And then the man it's sort of like the man in the iron mask. And the Beauty of the Beast story is she kisses this guy, this beast, and the beast turns into, the good-looking dude. The man in the mask is he wears this mask for a year, and then when he takes it off, he looks like the mask. So that's his point. His point is all this. Number 4 under C. God is beginning to make real in us what is actually pretend, making us in reality to be more like Jesus. And I say what we generally call sanctification. It's a word that you don't hear very much, but it's the process of becoming like Jesus. So then he goes, and he likes this idea that theology is very practical. And he says, what difference does theology make? And he goes to the Lord's Prayer. And he begins with, so I'm turning to page 2. He says, Our Father, and top of page 2. And what he says, we got a lot of pages of notes, so we'll work through here. He says, number 4, to put it bluntly, you are dressing up as Christ. When you say Our Father, it's like you are pretending. He's saying now we're saying in relationship to God, he is our Father, but you are not a son of God as Jesus is a son of God, is what he's saying. Number 7, you are not being like the Son of God, whose will and interest are at one with those of his Father. You are a bundle of self-centered fears, hopes, greeds, jealousies, and self-conceit. That's you guys, not me. I'm the teacher. All doomed to death. And I said, so Lewis is not discounting our changed hearts that have come as a result of our relationship with Jesus. He's focusing on our behaviors and choices which remain fallen. So in this way, number 9, this dressing up as Christ is a piece of outrageous cheek. That's where he's got this good British stuff. But the odd thing is that God has ordered us to do it. So understand, as I look at Scripture of what happened, our hearts have been changed. So we are alive. You were spiritually dead. This week in one of my classes, I asked the question that I've asked you guys before, God loves us because. And kids were giving me all these reasons, I'm his creation because I love him, and I get to play sort of the devil's advocate and play with that. And the bottom line is God loves us because he loves us. I mean, there's nothing that we offer him. Kids would say, because he sees sort of what I can give him, what can we give God? Does he look down the tunnel of time? Well, God's outside of time. We've already seen that. And so he loves us because he chose to love us. It's not a need in God. It's not something in us. It's just he loved us. And so as he loves us, he changes our hearts. So we're spiritually dead. He makes us spiritually alive. But making us spiritually alive doesn't change us completely. We've now moved from death to life, but you still talk and act and think the same. Otherwise, Romans 12 about renewing your mind makes no sense. We're now in this process that is often called sanctification of becoming who we really are. Remember, God can never love you more than he does. He can't accept you more than he does. He's not more pleased with you ever than he is already. But we are actually becoming who he says we are. In fact, we're becoming the person that from all of eternity God sees who we are. So God sees us as a finished product, even if we're not. And now we're in this process of changing. So it goes from our hearts to our heads, and how someone thinks then works itself out on how somebody responds. So if I use basketball, you can tell, or I use sports, and we did that, we've talked about it in here, we were doing it this week. And we did it at the end of class last week with throwing stuff to Kelly. If you've done a lot of sports, your thinking is sports. You've done this sort of body movement, and you throw something to somebody and they just catch it. I told you that's one of my most fun experiments, is to throw things at people and just see what they do. Athletes will catch it. And so we always have competitions of throwing things across the room, and I'll give people A's if they can knock something over. I have one game where if they can throw a pen into a coffee cup from across the room, they get one shot, $100. And man, kids love it. But I've had one kid actually did it. First throw, leaning back against the chair, just went, woo, and boop. I paid him $100. But I've had others do it, but over hundreds of throws. I mean, they just come and throw and throw and throw. And so, but what he's saying is we are becoming from the inside out who he's asked us to be. That's why often when we give people a bunch of rules, it doesn't work, because that's from the outside in. Telling you, do this. And Brown used to say that, fake it till you make it. I don't like that idea, but Lewis is sort of picking that up. And I think he turns it a little differently. He calls it pretending. But he's going to talk about what this pretending is. It's not really pretending. It's acting who you are, even though you're not actually that person, if that makes sense. So here we go, the function of pretending. There can be good pretending and there can be bad pretending. Here's the bad pretending. Number 3B. See where we are? Or if you want to be good grammarians, see where we is? There's a bad kind where the pretense is there instead of the real thing. When a man pretends he's going to help you instead of really helping you. That's the bad pretending. Here's the good pretending, where pretense leads up to the real thing. Number 5, when you're not feeling really friendly, but you know that's something you need to do or you want to do. So you put on a friendly manner and behave as if you're a nicer person. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's sort of cultural expectation. In a few minutes, we've all noticed you really will be feeling friendlier than you are. Maybe, maybe not. He does say it a little bit later, and he talks about children. And I like this better, is if you look at number 3, and then we'll back up a little bit. Pretending to be grown-ups. Children play house. They play soldier. They play, they do things that grown-ups do. And you see they're mimicking adults, but they'll be adults pretty soon. So he said we have to begin to act in the ways that we know that we are, even if we don't know that, even if we're really not there. Like I think of William and Kate's children. They're just little normal kids, but they certainly have to act differently than most kids. There are expectations on how they act. Why? Because the reality is that their little dude is third in the line to the throne. He's got to act. I mean, if that in that crazy little world that they have, he is something that he really isn't, but he is, so he has to be, even though he isn't. You got it?
Yeah. But it's kind of like in relationships when things get a little rocky and you start behaving towards one another in love, even if you don't feel it, and then it's like if you...
She's talking about love.
Then eventually the heart will follow.
And that's what Lewis says, that in relationships, even if you don't love someone and you don't feel, remember, love is an action, not a feeling, and we sort of have reversed it. And you treat them in ways that are loving. And Lewis does make the contention that you will start feeling, and I would say maybe. Aren't there just people you just don't like? And you treat them well, but you're like, man, I don't know what the deal is.
Still hoping that my heart will change.
Oh, there are. Be honest. Good. All right, so behaving as a Christian. How to get quality in reality. How to get there. If we want some quality to move from pretending to reality, we have to start behaving as if you had it already. Like in sports, all these teams now have psychologists. And what the psychologists do is they help players to visualize what they want to see happen. So if a guy has trouble shooting foul shots, you visualize it going in. And you do that in your mind enough times that you've got, so when the real thing happens, you kind of got the muscle memory and you got the brain, because it's all mental. Sport, I mean, it's athletic. But you look at these guys who are incredible athletes, and they're great in college, and then they get to the pros, and then they just disappear. And at that point, it's not physical, it's mental, I think, for the most part. And so here it is, you start behaving. Man, I am a Christian. I mean, there are certain patterns of thought and action that actually fit with who I am. That is why children's games are so important. Children become grown-ups by watching grown-ups. And so if the models for these children are not good models, they're going to grow up as, but we have this model. And he's going to use Jesus both as example and Jesus as his Spirit changing us. So he's going to look at a couple different ways that Jesus works in us. All this time, number 4, they're hardening their muscles and sharpening their wits so that the pretense of being grown up helps them to grow up in earnest. I learned something I thought was fascinating this week, and I'm sure you want to hear it. A kid that was in my youth group at Key Biscayne, Scott Eckhart, I don't know if you'd remember him at all. He has a son who is now in the Navy, went to Rutgers, ROTC, he's in the Navy, and he is an officer in a submarine. Do you know what they use to drive submarines? Do you drive a submarine? To make submarines move? They use an Xbox controller. Same Xbox controller kids use for games. Because what they've realized is all these kids have spent so many hours doing Xbox that when they put them in there, automatically they already know how to do it. That's fascinating. So here it is. You're playing games, number 4, but as they're playing games with Xbox, you're learning something that you use in the real world. My daughter was training on these robots So they've got robots that they can use like in Jackson Hospital, and they can do the surgery in Africa. So you're here in this robot doing this, and they've got it set up so your actions are being done by a robot in another country. It's the most fascinating thing in the world. But she was training, thinking maybe this is something she wanted to do. And what she found is she had the reflexes of a surgeon, even though she's just brand new, because surgeons are my age, and they didn't play a lot of video games, and she played video games, and she already knew how to move. And so they're finding, isn't that cool? So here we're playing games, but playing the games actually moves you to adulthood. Not every game does that. That's why I think every kid ought to play on a sports team, because it's learning, you're hardening muscles, you're doing, not just physically, but mentally, you're learning how. I worked with a guy who had never been on a team before. He was a runner at Penn State, so he did all these individual events, and when he got to our job and people teased him like people tease each other, like I'm here, he didn't know what to do. He'd never had the muscles hardened. He'd never been part of something. So here he is he's saying if you want to get there, you got to start acting there. You got to start acting the part. Dressing up as Christ. So the moment you realize, number one, under B, here I am dressing up as Christ, it's extremely likely that you will see at once some way in which at the very moment the pretense could be made less of a pretense and more of a reality. If you walk like you're there. I mean, you walk, kids will talk about somebody walks with swag. Look at the swag they have. And there's something about that. We were watching a video of some dances that the kids did on Thursday night, and there's this kid who's just an awesome baseball player. He's got a full ride to Vanderbilt, but he may go in the first round, so he may never play high school or college. He may just get drafted. Well, he was doing these dances this other night, and he just walks with swag. Even if he wasn't a good baseball player, just the way he carries himself, you're like, he's got to be good at something. Just look how he moves. And so we're good at something. We are sons of God, sons and daughters, if you want to use that phrase, we can be. And so we begin to move in the way that's consistent with who we are. I mean, you're not an orphan, and you're not alone, and you're not forsaken. Why so downcast, O my soul? Remember that? Psalm 41. Put your trust in God, and it goes on to say, I will again praise you. And so we act on what we know to be true, even if our emotions are telling us something different. Even if our habits are one thing, we're becoming more aware of them. And I think that's the gift of the Spirit to say, that's what you used to do. And Paul will talk about that. Here's how you used to live. Here's how you now live. Put on Christ. And so you're going to have both sides, the inner and the outer. So you'll find several things, number two, going on in your mind, which would not be going on if you were really a son of God. Well, stop them. That's good. Well, stop them. See, that's a huge line, I think. So you're thinking negatively. Well, stop it. That doesn't mean it won't come back. But don't engage. Like, I think we like pity parties. And he's saying, you're indulging your sin. Stop it. It's not who you are anymore. And it's not that easy. I got it. But the idea is there's some part to play there where you're playing a sport and you visualize yourself dropping the touchdown pass. Well, stop it. Don't visualize that. Because what we visualize often becomes the reality. Don't make that. And so if you're a Christian and you find yourself in a situation that you know is destructive for you, well, you do have some power there. Stop it as much as you're able. Again, easier said than done. Or we may realize that instead of saying your prayers, you ought to be downstairs writing a letter or helping your wife or wash up. Be saying, do it. Just there's a sense in which you're responsible. I think the biggest thing I fight with kids is they don't want to take responsibility for choices that they make. It's always somebody else's fault. And it's so much fun. It is fun to put them in a corner and just keep pestering them until they finally just said, I did it. I said, all right, okay, we're good. That's all I wanted to hear you say. Just own up. I don't really care. Like if they're late to class, and I don't care if kids come late, but if they come late, man, sometimes I just harangue them. You're late. You know what time it is? And I'll pretend like I'm mad. And then and it's always and finally they said, yeah, I went to the bathroom. That's all I wanted to hear. Just tell me the truth. Own it. Yes, sir.
I want your opinion on why this change in our culture is happening. Because I was just talking about this the other day with some friends, that kids don't want to take responsibility.
Yeah. Bob is seconding this. I'll give you my read. This is only from one little tiny perspective. Parents refuse to let their children fail. Every team, you get an award now. So there's always a participation award, so everyone's a champion. Guess what? In real life, it doesn't work that way. Everyone gets 8, grades are inflated, Everybody's an A student. It used to be C. C's average. If you get a C now, it's like, I'm failing. No, you got a C. That's average. Nobody's average. And we'll get emails. I still get emails from parents who are juniors and seniors, and I don't respond to them. Or I'll write them back and say, your son or daughter, I said, please understand, I'm trying not to be a jerk, but I'm going to talk to your kid because next year in college, they're not going to have you. And generally, I don't get parents on my case. They'll say, they'll get embarrassed maybe, or some will say, thank you. That's what I need to happen. So I'll get on kids' case and say, why are you making your mom write me? Like, how old are you? So we just don't, our culture or our familial structure doesn't do that. Yes?
I think if you take it further than they don't want them to fail, a lot of parents want their children to be an example of how successful they are.
Yeah, I think Mary's saying it. We also live vicariously through our kids.
Yeah.
Sure. I've seen it with our school baseball team. Of all sports, that seems to be the most, where if a kid doesn't make the team or doesn't play enough, man, those parents just go ballistic. And fortunately, the coaches are all pretty thick-skinned, but it's a little dinky school. I mean, we've won more state championships than any other school in the state of Florida, so we do have a good program. Yeah, we were 92, and on a Wheaties box. Where can you go from there? That's right.
That's kind of why, not to berate what you said, I have a problem with swag.
Okay.
You know, I think
Mary's saying she has swag.
I do.
And if you watch her going to the service today, you'll see it. She says she has a problem with swag.
Yeah, I think that more often than not, swag leads to problems.
It could.
And especially with people who don't know Christ.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to do things in all humility. Brown used to say, do something today anonymously.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, if you want.
I'm letting you speak anonymously.
Okay, thank you. But I mean, I do have a problem.
Yeah, so Mary has a problem with swag. The problem is how we generally define swag. Let me tell you this kid who's got swag. You would never know, other than watching him, that he's this incredible baseball player. He never talks about it. Other people do. I'll tell you one, was your hand up? I'll be right there. Okay, here's one thing he did. He had a tournament in Lakeland, baseball tournament. When he was a little boy, he had a friend with special Down syndrome, and he was at his school, and they were buddies. And this kid now just turned 18, and he was over close to West Palm Beach, and he wanted him to come to his birthday party. Well, this kid's at a tournament. He took off after his game on Saturday, drove all the way over there, went to the kid's party, and drove back that night. He's got swag, but he's got a humble swag. Does that make sense?
People, if you know someone's got swag, that's when I don't like it.
Yeah.
They exude.
Well, that's not swag, though. Swag is a natural thing. If you've got to fake it, that's not swag. That's some pretend.
Well, when I was teaching at Westminster, a lot of the baseball players had swag.
They thought they had swag.
Well, they acted like they did.
Yeah, but that's not real.
You know what I'm saying? That's why I'm.
Yeah. It's a fake Gucci bag. $10 on the side street in New York. I'm going to buy a couple for you when I'm up there. Yeah. Yes, sir, with the nice hair. That is your husband, right? Okay.
No, I was just going to say is that I think you hit it, is that how do we define swag?
Yeah, how do we define swag?
And
This is a class on swag.
what came to my mind is that one of our daughters, it seemed like about 9th or 10th grade, all of a sudden, I'm going to say she had swag.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a confidence, but it wasn't, I don't know what to say, but there was a different arrogance.
There was an arrogance? There was not an arrogance.
The shoulders were up,
Yeah.
more of a confidence in what she
Yes,
did.
talking about her daughter in about 9th grade. See, that's swag. Swag's not something you fake.
Confidence.
Yeah, that's it. But they use the term swag now.
That's God confidence.
Yeah. Because you will see people say,
It's just the word swag for that.
there you go.
No, seriously, who does?
They just raised their hand.
Okay, but I mean,
That's 20% of the world. Look, there's 10 of us.
But I'm going to say,
20% of the world uses swag. Get it right.
and I'm going to go out on a twig here.
A twig.
For myself is that as I'm looking at the swag or the swag not, I feel that the Lord's asking me too
Yeah.
I don't get to define it, because
Yeah.
God's doing something in that
Yeah.
person's life.
Yeah. See, here's what I would think. I want us to redeem that word. I like the word. I think it's funny. Because you got to pretend, man, of all people, Christians should have swag. It's a confidence that says God's in charge. And there is a humility. Because, like, if you are humble, you don't ever have to say anything to anybody. Because it just is. And it becomes obvious. I always tell kids, cream rises to the top. Just be patient. You're going to be good. I'll pull kids aside sometimes and say, you're not made for high school. Man, you're made for life after this, and that's a good thing. And you just wait. You just wait. You come back in 10 years, and let's see what you're doing then. And so so we can use a different word. Words are just words. Sometimes their meaning is soft. And so you can kind of redefine things. Yes, ma'am.
You know,
We're getting posturing here, swag posturing. See, Bob's got swag. You do have swag. You know, you started Habitat for Humanity and nobody knows it. To me, that's swag. Anyway, go ahead. I think that's so cool. Like I will always. You notice I walk 3 steps behind him when we walk into church.
I lost my train of thought.
That's the idea.
You lost your swag.
It's easy to get confused with real confidence and swag.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Top Gun, is a good example. He's a pilot that can do anything.
Yeah.
He's got that confidence.
Yeah, but it's not.
Swag.
Yeah, no, it's not real.
Some of these baseball players
Yeah.
that were on Rich Hoffman's champion team.
Yep.
They had it. Look, Rodriguez was one of them.
Yep.
You know, but you can understand
Mary's
that.
favorite.
Tremendous confidence, and that's a good thing.
Yep.
I think.
Yeah. No, that's what we're saying. We're defining it positively. Again, words have this large semantic circle. You can kind of go where you want with them. I saw Rich Hoffman last Thursday when she got inducted into the Hall of Fame. He was there. Yep.
I was gonna say, it sounds like we're talking about confidence is the good part, and when you add the arrogance, it becomes swag.
Yeah. I'm going to get rid of the arrogance and just take the confidence. Yeah. Well, whatever. I didn't mean to get off on a tangent here. Sorry. But it's beginning to act like who you are. So go and do it. You see what is happening. This is number 7 on page 4. The Christ himself, which is funny how he does that. The Son of God, who is man just like you, and God, just like his Father, is actually at your side and is already at that moment beginning to turn your pretense into a reality. Here's what he's saying. On the outside, you begin to do this because on the inside, it's becoming real. And so begin to act what Scripture says you are. You're a child of God. Therefore, act like a child of God. But I don't feel like a child of God. It doesn't matter what you feel. Here's what's true. You really are okay. We'll do the trust game, where kids fall back. We got you. Now, we may not get them, but we would like to think we do, but God's got you. You can fall back. There can be this great confidence, however you want to do it, because he cannot, because of his very character, the nature of God cannot let you fall. Now, you may fall and you feel like he's let you go, but he hasn't let you fall. It's even his kindness there. So, let's see. This is not merely a fancy way of saying your conscience is telling you what to do. He's really saying this is something different, because your conscience is still moving towards Christ-likeness. Let's see. There you go. Look at number 11. For you are no longer thinking simply about right and wrong. You are trying to catch the good infection. Remember, he talked about that last week from a person. You're just trying to live like Christ. The issue was that not so much right or wrong, but you do see this, and he would agree to this, and I do to a certain extent. The bracelets the kids wear, what would Jesus do? That's a start. I tell them, what would Jesus do as a start? Really, the better one is, what did Jesus do? I mean, it's the finished work of Christ that we depend on, not Christ as the example. Even though Christ as the example, if there's the finished work, is not a bad idea. It's more like a painting, a portrait, than like obeying a set of rules. See, I think that is so good. Here, what do you do as a Christian? Here are 10 rules. And he says, no, just try to imitate Christ. Thomas à Kempis, the imitation of Christ. How would Jesus act in this? And I think in the midst of this dance, it's the Spirit who is guiding you towards certain actions. And I'm not sure, we've talked about this too, that that the Spirit has worked until after the fact, where you look and say, oh, okay, that was a positive choice. And the odd thing, number 13, is that while in one way it's much harder than keeping rules, in another way it's far easier. He's going to talk about it. We haven't done that yet, right? Because I'm working through all these chapters. What makes Christianity hard, what makes it easy, difficult. We did that last week. And the easy part is that he's working in us. The difficult part is trying to keep these rules. I grew up with the rules. And it wasn't a totally, it wasn't this incredibly negative world, but internally it was a pretty negative world. And you judged others. I remember and this isn't slamming my parents. My parents certainly loved Jesus. And my mom, as I watch her now, she, after my dad died, what she began to do is hang out with all these women whose husbands had died. And she just became this incredibly compassionate, kind woman to them. And so I'm really impressed with her. But in this world, we never owned a new car until I was almost out of high school because Christians buy used cars. It's that sort of mindset that said Jesus, others, you, and so you are always third on the totem pole. And it became a set of rules. Sunday was the worst day in the week. Just what a horrible day. You just dread Sunday morning. Gosh, it's too bad, huh? You're laughing. That was your life. Did you hate Sundays? What? I said, did you dislike Sundays? Because your world was pretty. I mean, you're coming from that Dutch stuff, so you could smoke pipes though. We couldn't do that much. Yeah. Like if I didn't cut the grass on Saturday, I was in trouble because I'd get yelled at because it was Sunday and I hadn't cut it yet. You can't cut it on Sunday because Jesus will get really mad.
But it's good, you have a day of rest.
Yeah, but for me, it wasn't a day of rest. For me, it was a day to go to church services that were geared towards my parents, and we'd never get home. And the things that I would do to rest, like watch a Dolphin game, I couldn't do because we were at church. Yeah. Finally, though, on Wednesday nights, we had to go to church too, but that's not really the Sabbath. So I was able to convince them I needed to stay home because you know what was on? Canadian rules football, CFL, and then after that came on women's roller derby. Oh, my word, that's the greatest thing in the world. It is. They would pull each other's hair.
Women's what?
Roller derby. Oh, the Bay City Bombers. Remember that? They'd come around each other and they'd get each other in the face, they'd grab hair, and then they'd get all this momentum and swing all the way around. I thought, this is the greatest thing God's invented.
Are you old enough to remember?
Yes, I am.
Okay, when nothing was open on Sunday?
Yes.
I didn't know if you were.
Yeah.
She's not.
No.
But I lived in Nashville for a little bit, and there were a lot of things closed on Sunday.
I lived in Nashville too, but yeah, I mean, all of a sudden it just slowly but surely, everything's open.
Well, when I was a kid, you'd never play sports on Sunday. And the kids we deal with, most of their games are on Sunday.
We didn't play cards either.
Oh, well, we didn't play cards any day of the week. No.
Wasn't open on Sunday?
The what? When Publix wasn't open.
Yeah.
Nothing was open.
Well, even when we lived in New Jersey, you couldn't buy alcohol until after 12.
Oh, you could never buy
Yeah.
alcohol on Sunday where I lived.
Yeah. You had to make your own.
That was always in the South. I think in the Northeast it was different.
Well, the Northeast became more liberal more quickly. Yeah. Always has been the case. All right, so we're talking about Sundays and how horrible the day is. How horrible Sundays are. All right, so number 14, the real Son of God is at your side. See, there's another just huge statement. Christ is with you always. He's at your side. I think it's so cool. Like as you're going through this, he's there, not watching you like, uh-oh, but he's there with you. He's in you. I mean, go ahead. Yes, sir.
I'm thinking if I were to ask my daughter, what is their view of Sunday during growing up and so forth, do you think Schaefer and your kids would answer that?
My kids would be positive. Notice my kids aren't here with me because they're free. It's fascinating. My kids are having to redefine, and not just my kids. This generation is having to redefine their relationship to Jesus, and it's generally not through the church. The church, we somehow have lost a lot of this generation. And many of them have, God is still working in their hearts. So Kelly was talking to a young lady yesterday who has given up on church basically, but she loves Jesus. Taylor, my daughter, she keeps trying different congregations. She hasn't found any. So she's connected online, like podcasts that she listens to. And those have become more of her sermons. So she hasn't run away from Christianity. She is just redefining it. And then my son Schaefer came to me one day and said, Dad, I think a lot like you do. I mean, he thinks as a Christian, but he just hasn't found a place. Because the way that we do church, kids are much more interactive. In fact, I had this discussion this week with a group of kids, and we're working through theology. They're writing a credo, and we were talking about church. And I said, how many of you go to church? Well, none of them go to church. Maybe one or two, out of 50 kids maybe. And why don't you go? Well, it's boring. Part of it is social media. Their attention span's about that long. The idea that they don't trust authority unless you've proven yourself. So to have someone up there that they don't know tell them how to live, they're not going to listen. And so they've rejected church. And then one kid had this interactive thing. He said, if we did this, I would go. And so they want their voice heard. So I've got another kid who is about, if he's your son, Danny Dvorak's his name. If he's your kid, you're so proud. I mean, went to Purdue, engineer, now works for 3M in North Carolina. And he's given up on church, except he now goes to a house church. 15 people. And they're multiplying. And every week someone else brings sort of the message. So they're redefining it. My kids would they wouldn't be angry at Christianity at all. But they certainly are not invested in what we present to them. Sunday morning, the question would be, for Ransom, is he going to go to a church service or go play soccer? I'm going to go play soccer. And you say, oh, when I was a kid, that wasn't an option. But it is an option. So they're finding other ways to do this. But God is still working. So it's going to be fascinating to see how this works itself out. So I'm actually very encouraged, not discouraged. I'm afraid what we have here may not last another generation.
So when we talk about the Ten Commandments and keeping the Sabbath holy, does that?
Well, boy, I heard a guy today, this week, J. Vernon McGee, old 50s guy. He argued that the Sabbath is completely done. I've never heard anybody from his sort of tradition say that. He said, we no longer have it. He said, that was for the Jews, and it's over. And we say the Christian Sabbath. He said, that's a different day. It's not the Sabbath. You know what we would argue really is that you could argue that every day is the Sabbath. And so and the Reformed position has really been 1 day in 7. Because when I was a pastor, I did not rest on the Sabbath. Kent's working pretty hard. This is not a Sabbath rest for him. And so he'll be off tomorrow. And so that's how Calvin would argue, 1 day in 7. I think the big thing is it's a day of slowing down and remembering that everything you have is really a gift of God. So I tell kids, isn't it cool that you have this Christian tradition? Because of that, you have a Sabbath. And you even have Saturdays off. I mean, you don't have school 7 days a week like people used to work 7 days a week. So I'm not a huge Sabbatarian, but I am a Sabbatarian when it comes to like slowing down and taking time. If someone would say, when's your Sabbath? I would say my Sabbath starts at about 7 o'clock at night when nobody's home. And I go outside with a book and maybe a cigar, and that's when my conversations with God are the most real. And I journal, and I do my reflecting, and that's my recharge. And that's when, if you would say, when do you feel closest, that would be my time. But I'm not a pastor of a church either. So it's easy for me to say that. Yes, sir. This is why we don't get through our notes. It's your fault. Your fault. I'm just saying it's when there's a problem, it's always a woman's fault, and her name happens to be Mary.
This increase in the small churches?
Yes.
House churches? Part of it is because one of the things that people find, I went to the Barna research.
Yeah, Bob's talking about small churches.
I went to Barna research in Fort Lauderdale 3 days ago, all morning. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Very deep. But
Deep
one of the
thinker.
things is that people, they're lonely, and there's real fellowship in a small group.
Yeah.
You go into a big church, go to church, and that's it, you're lost.
Yeah. He's talking about big churches, you're lost. Small churches, people know you. Let me piggyback on that real quick. I think a large church is it's an oxymoron. It defeats itself. It's no longer church. It's just, a pastor of a large church would disagree with me, but again, that's not my job.
So the other thing is that loneliness is the biggest complaint that people make
Yeah.
in the whole country.
Yeah. People are lonely.
Yeah, so if they get with other people.
Kent, I'm lonely, be nice to me.
Part of it. But the other part is, once they get with other people, the best thing for them is to get into a ministry where they can
Yep.
do something.
Yep.
for those people.
There's a couple books out by a church group, and what they did is when they had small groups, all their small groups were ministry. They're outward oriented. So they would go to the local 7-Elevens and just clean bathrooms. And they wouldn't tell anybody where they were from. They'd just say, may we clean your bathroom? What? And so they started doing this, and what they found is people were so intrigued that they then began to get into these conversations, but it wasn't a forced conversation. Why are you doing this? We're doing this because we love Jesus. Well, what do you want out of it? We don't want anything. Can we pay you? No. No. This is our service to you because you're doing a service to the community. And so you find when you do that and you're looking out, because everything kind of turns in our culture, so that's pretty cool. That's why kids are cool, because we do all these outreach projects. And it is so much fun to watch when we were in Chicago, we work at a home for adults with special needs, and our kids go and they're not sure what to expect. They come out, they're so enthralled. They just are, they're energized, they can take on the world. So yeah, you're right. When groups are looking out, because people are so lonely. That's why everywhere you go, you got to talk to people. Because we have this. Like you guys have each other. Some people have nobody. My mom will talk about people in her retirement center that have no kids have quit talking to them, and they're just by themselves. She said they'll be at lunch all by themselves. And my mom, the extrovert, makes her way.
That's the one thing I learned. I learned a lot of things. But the main thing I remember from Rick Warren's book, God wired us to be with people.
Yeah, God wired us to be with people. Rick Warren. Yeah, that's good. And so in small churches, you actually get to know each other. We had a kid that her senior game in high school, basketball player, her father had died. He was older and he had died. And she did this game, and he had died maybe a month before. Senior game, her entire little congregation showed up. And they were all there with fat heads. You know the fat heads where they print your head on this big piece of cardboard. And they had fat heads, and anytime she touched the ball, they just all started cheering for Destiny. That was the coolest thing. And I said, is this her family, like this extended family? Because I'm announcing this thing. And they said, no, this is her church. And she made 2 shots at the end to win the game. And man, were they like thrilled. So there's an example. She will never be alone. And it's young kids all the way up to older. So she had the multi-generation. That's the other thing that I think is what is missing in our culture that we need. And that'd be another reason why I think kids don't take responsibility, because they need other adults in their lives to slap them in the head and say, you doing what? Like even working, I think it's important for kids to work, because then you have to learn responsibility. You didn't go to work on how many days this week? Guess what? You don't have a job. Why don't you try again? You need to find another job. So anyway. All right. So the real Son of God is at your side. He's beginning, number 15, to turn you into the same kind of thing as himself. He's injecting his kind of life. And beginning, this is last week, beginning to turn the tin soldier into a live man. That's one of the themes. And we'll do this last week. The last week we meet, we'll put some of these together. The part of you that does not like it is the part that is still tin. So I want to get through this. We got it. We got about 10 minutes, and I want to get to 2 other discoveries. How Christ works in us. I like this. He says Christ, this is number 1, A. He works in all sorts of ways. What he's going to argue is that Christ works in us in all sorts of things, some that we call religious and some that we don't. So he can work through us in nature. So someone says, I meet Christ out in nature. You say, yeah, you should. Guess who created nature? I understand who God is by watching my animals. I told you that. That I watch how they live, and I watch their trust, and I watch even how responsible I feel for these little knuckleheads and their strays. And I think if they hadn't somehow come into our life, who'd be watching them? And if I feel so responsible, imagine how much what God feels, and they are so dependent. Like, where are they going to get food? Their credit card expired last year. Publix doesn't take whatever. And so through nature, through our own bodies, through books, even non-Christian books, one of the themes that Westminster Seminary has is all truth is God's truth. It doesn't matter where you go. If somebody says something that's true, it's really piggybacking on Christianity. And watch how many non-Christians are using what Van Til says is borrowed capital. In order for the world to work, they have to use Christian themes because there aren't any other. And so watch movies and redemption movies. And they're not Christians, and you think you just told a Christian story. Listen to rock groups. Eminem, who you can't play in church because every other word's a curse word. But if you listen to his stuff, here's a guy trying to find peace. and you're like, man, this is so good. We can't sing it, but man, he's hit something. So the idea is we don't reject non-Christians or even what they say. That's why I tell kids, yeah, you listen to non-Christian music. You know why? Because some of it is so good. So I'll often do assignments where we did the Annunciation. So Gabriel comes to Mary, and you've got or the angels. This one too. The angels sang to the shepherds, and glory to God in the highest. I'd say find a song that you know that you could put in the angel's mouth. It can't be a Christian song. What would they sing? Man, is it fun to hear them. Because the themes then of all this stuff they're listening, even rap stuff that they're listening to, that, and if you've listened to rap, I just don't have a rap ear. Like guys, they'll listen to it in class, and kids will say, sorry, Mr. Reed, sorry, Mr. Reed. I didn't hear a word they said, so you don't have to apologize. I have no idea that they just cussed. But here, so he works through all these things, and then other people, even some things that seem anti-Christian. We learn a lot about Christianity by going to even different political, I'm going to say Islam. But above all, he works on us through each other. Men are mirrors or carriers of Christ to other men. Even non-Christians mirror Christ in some ways. Sometimes unconscious carriers. So this good infection, F, can be carried by those who don't have it even themselves. That is, Christ even uses even non-believers to make us more into his image. That's so cool. Remember, he's infected the entire universe. People who are not Christians themselves help me to Christianity. If you read about his story, when he's teaching, he's hanging out with these non-Christians, and they're asking him questions where he rejects God. And as he listens to their arguments, the people who actually make the most sense are Christians. But he doesn't realize they're Christians. And little by little, it's the non-Christians that move him towards Christianity, because the arguments of these non-Christian philosophers that are working at Oxford are so weak that he's drawn them to like J.R.R. Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings dude, that he's drawn to him because his answers actually are fuller. I think that's so good. So non-Christians played a part in him coming to know Christ. But usually it's those who know him that bring him to others. So then here's where the church falls in. Showing him to one another is so important. See, I enjoy this class. I mean, I tell Kent I would teach class and I didn't care if anybody showed up. I really was doing it because I love Kent. But now we have our thing. Like we have our thing. This is cool. So even if I don't stay for the service, which I am not today because of homecoming, I am so tired. I just want to go home. When I had COVID, I came to Sunday school. Why? Because this is so cool. And so it's showing ourselves to one another. You might say that when two Christians are following Christ together, there's not twice as much Christianity as when they are apart, but 16 times as much. Isn't that cool? So when I had this youth group, Kent and I had youth groups at the Key, man, I was trying to describe it to some of my high schoolers at Westminster. With your boys, there's something about it. So don't forget this. That's the role of the church. So as these kids, are my kids' age, are looking for something, that's what they're looking for, is what you say, relationship. But it's relationship that's founded on who Christ is. So it's not just let's be nice to them. Social gospel, it's grounded in Jesus and what he's done. So theology matters, but it's theology done in a way that is relational. It doesn't have to be any less convincing, but even said in ways that are engaging rather than sort of disengaging. Our part. At first, it's natural for a baby to take its mother's milk without knowing its mother. And then he says, but then as we grow, we don't stay babies. I want to get to the end here. Let's see. So it's, there you go. Never pin your whole faith on a human being, not if he is the best. This is M or wisest in the world. Here's what he's saying. Our part in this is you got to grow up. You got to do your part. And if someone says, I have trouble with this, or I don't do this, or don't do that, man, grow up. Act your age. I'll tell kids that. Act your age. What are you doing? I tell them I go between being their teacher to being a parent. I said, let me talk like a parent right now. If I was your parent, I'd look at you right now and say, what are you doing? Act your age. I said, okay, now I'm back to being your teacher. And I'll often tell parents, here's what I told your kid. And parents will say, I'm glad I have another parent in there. And so what Christ is doing in us. Now we begin to see what the New Testament is always talking about. We're born again, putting on Christ. This is B. We have the mind of Christ. C. Put right out of your head the idea that those are only fancy ways of saying that Christians are to read what Christ said and try to carry it out. Like you would read Plato or Marx. It means something more. E. The real person, Christ, here and now, in the very room where you are saying your prayers, is doing things to you. So we do our part. Man, grow up. But because Christ is working in us. It's the outside, it's the inside. It's not a question of a good man who died 2,000 years ago. It is a living man, still as much a man as you are, and still as much God as he was. He comes and interferes with your very self, killing the old natural self in you and replacing it with the kind of self he has. You know, it'd be cool for us to read Narnia after this, because we see his theology in fiction form. I mean, there's so many things he does in the Narnia stories that you hear in Mere Christianity. And I think that's pretty cool.
And Narnia was written after.
Yeah, I believe so. At first, only for moments. Then he says, you start with only for moments, then for longer periods. Finally, if all goes well, turn you permanently into a different sort of thing. That would be when Jesus comes back or you die. I mean, he talks about it. There's always a struggle. And I think we have pockets, different pockets, each of us, where we're just going to be fighting our whole lives. I mean, and it's different for different people. I had a lady, and I can no names, but years ago, who was well off. I mean, she was financially okay, but somehow it was a thrill to go into stores and steal stuff. And even as an adult with 2 children, she would go steal stuff. Why? She just liked the thrill. And she talked to me about it. She was kind of mad at me because my response to her was, that's it? Because it wasn't mine. I didn't know how to even process that. Like, you steal stuff? I'm the opposite. I told you, if I see money on the ground, I leave it. I'm not going to pick it up. It's not mine. But someone else will. And I said, well, then they can. I don't have to. So I'm the opposite when it comes to that. But I have my other areas that aren't hers. And so it's a struggle, but we are, like, have you seen yourself, if you could look back at your life previously and compare yourself to where you are now, my guess is you've seen growth. I'm in better shape now than I was. I may not be in great shape, but I'm in better shape. I look at my life and I look at decisions I've made in the past. I have a kid who wants me to write my story and tell him all my sins, because I'll say I'm the worst sinner in the room, guys. If nothing else than age, and then decisions I've made that made sense then, but now I look at them and I say that was just totally ridiculous. Like, what was I thinking? So he's changing us, which leads to 2 other discoveries, and these are good. Here's the first one. You begin to notice, besides our particular sinful acts, our sinfulness. Begin to be alarmed not only about what we do, but about what we are. I'm not going to read all these because there's too many of them, but here's what he says. The more you become like Christ, the more you begin to realize you're not like Christ. The more God begins to uncover your heart, not your heart, because our heart's been changed, your actions and your attitudes and your thinking, the more you realize how decrepit they are. And so I tell kids, if you'd follow me around for a day and just see what I do externally, you'd say, he's got it sorted together. But if you could read my mind, if you knew what was in there, and the hatred and the rejection and all sorts of things, you would be a little less impressed. So the more you come to know Christ, it's not just what you do, it's who you are. It's how we think. We've got these rebellious thoughts. And so that's what he talks about in A. You can read all those. There's a lot of them. But it is after 10:30. Look at them all, 21. And then here's the second one. And you get to the point where you realize you can't do it yourself. That's part of it. You can't change yourself. Look at number 19. All the way right before B. So this is page 9. He talks about, if you go back to 15, he says, I begin to examine what I do, and I look at my good actions, number 15. How many of them were done for right motive? So he gets below the surface, and he says, what happens when you come to know Christ is you get below the surface. And I might be doing things that look appropriate, but the question is, why am I doing them? I might say, hello, how are you? Boy, what a nice gentleman. And then under the surface, I'm thinking, boy, what a horrible person. I hate them. And so the motives are totally wrong, but it looks right. How many for the fear of public opinion or desire to show off? How many from some sort of obstinacy or sense of superiority, which in different circumstances might equally had led to some very bad act? That's why I think when you see a mob get together, you see what people are really made of. Once you've lost that, now you can be anonymous. Hence all this stuff online. If you've read about some of these girls, who was a girl, a tennis player, and she lost at the U.S. Open, and she got all these death threats. If somebody was with her in a room, they would never do that to her. But if you can do it anonymously, and you can join the crowd, and then so you begin to get to motives. And then 19, but I cannot by direct moral effort give myself new motives. You might work from the outside in, but you can't work from the inside out. After the few steps in the Christian life, we realize that everything which really needs to be done in our souls can be done only by God. And that's B. In reality, of course, it is God who does everything. And what's our part? 1, we at most allow it to be done in us. We humble ourselves before him. That's the swag. That's another Christian swag. There's a confidence and a humility. There's a willingness to say, yeah, I was wrong. There's a willingness to say, I don't have it together. Father, move in my heart. I know when I was being grilled by the denomination however many years ago, and they were telling me how bad I was. And internally I was thinking, yeah, you guys only know the beginning. There's so much more. If you really wanted to pick on me, I could give you so much more ammunition. We're so much worse than we think, or than others think. But we're so much better than others think. I mean, there's 2 ways to look at that. So he says, in a sense, you might even say it was God who was doing the pretending. Because he knows what we're really like. You know, we're all dirty and our clothes are dirty and we've got scratches because we've been in a fight. And the Father comes along and says, you look great. The three-personal God, so to speak, sees before him, in fact, a self-centered, greedy, grumbling, and rebellious human animal. But he says, let's pretend this is not a mere creature, but our son. It's like Christ insofar as it is a man, for he became man. Let us pretend that it is also like him in spirit. Let us treat it as if it were what in fact it is not. Let us pretend in order to make the pretense into a reality. That's good. And so God looks at you as if you were a little Christ. Christ stands beside you to turn you into one. So you do your part, but it's really God's part. I dare say this idea of a divine make-believe sounds rather strange, but is it so strange, really? 3 more lines here. Last page here. We did it. Is not that how the higher thing always raises the lower? I was reading an article yesterday about how people have almost made their animals into humans. They're not humans, but I can look at my dog and I know what he's saying in English. A mother teaches her baby to talk. There we go. This is where he says it. To it as if it understood long before it really does. But I did read another article. We treat our dogs as if they're almost human. That is when they become almost human in the end. And so here's the good news. We can be honest. Here's the good news. Our hearts have been changed. Here's the good news. Christ is working in us to make us what we are, in a sense, pretending to be. That's the whole idea. It's funny when you like the Catholic Church, kids will talk about their priest. And I don't slam the Catholic Church, but I do want them to know that the priests are not probably in better shape than they are. Don't do that to that poor guy. That's a tough place to have to live, to have to always pretend. In the Protestant church, you can pretend less. But when you're the guy who wears the special clothes and you've got to listen to the confessions and you're the one who's always giving the Eucharist, that's a lot of pressure. And so when it begins to crumble, which it does in all of us, who are you going to tell? And hopefully then we understand that our leaders are also, as we say, clay feet, but Christ is making us real. So, comments? Don't you wish you knew what I really thought about each of you?
I was just thinking about the definition of swag again.
We're back to swag.
Back to swag.
If at first you can't succeed, swag.
About swag being confidence plus arrogance, but then as you were just talking about humility, confidence plus humility,
Mm-hmm.
Christian swag is a redeemed swag where it's
Yeah.
the confidence plus humility.
Here's swag to me. I was watching a basketball game with this little dude, Gator. He was in 10th grade. Gator went on to play at FIU. He may have a shot for the pros. He's that good of a player. So he's playing basketball. Not his favorite sport, but he's playing basketball. And two boys who are also D1 athletes. So they're young kids at this point, playing against Palmer, and they're fast breaking every chance they get. Gator's the point guard. When he would do something well, cool. When he would mess up, he would always look at his friend, he'd point at him, go, as in, it was me. That's swag. That was Gator saying, and I told him that. I said, Gator, whatever you do with great confidence. And that's pretty cool. We have confidence. So when we mess it up, we're allowed to say, yeah, that was me.
It's not an acronym, it's just short for swagger.
Oh, I thought it was an acronym for something.
Maybe it is. But
It is. Some weirdos are Gentiles. All right. Yes, swag. I'm going to start calling you swag. Look at that hair. You have to have swag.
You know, the comments you made about today's church,
Yeah.
it's not attractive.
It's not attractive.
the younger generation. And so, on somewhat regular or irregular basis, we have friendship Sunday. Bring a friend. It probably should be, bring a friend if they're over 50,
Yeah. He's talking about bring a friend day, which is a good idea.
which is a good idea.
But he's saying bring a friend if they're over 50.
If they're over 50, bring a friend.
Right.
Because they might be late.
Right.
If they're younger than that, invite them to your home for a
You got it. Or go meet them at the bar. Yeah, it changes. You know what I tell kids too? I said, guys, we're working through theology, so someday when you're at a party at FSU and somebody has had a little bit too much to drink and they're actually being honest for a minute, you'll have answers. So it's all relational. So that shouldn't discourage us as like this particular church, but I think it does cause us to ask some questions. And the gospel is still the gospel, and the truth is still truth. And just saying, what part do we play? So again, I'm encouraged, even by this. I'm encouraged by this. So let's say this church doesn't draw young guys, but let's say it does draw the over 50. But there's so many millions of hundreds of thousands of over 50s in our area that simply need, as you say, companionship. And we've got Jesus. So yes, ma'am. Bring your dog to church day.
This has nothing to do with the lesson, but do you think that the pandemic has changed
Yes.
people to want church
Sure.
at home?
She's asking about the pandemic. Yeah.
So that they might want to
Yeah.
grab that cup of coffee, turn on their computer.
You got it.
And it's the same church, but then we're called together.
Yep.
We're called together.
Well, here's the difference. If you're not really connected to that particular body, and now you have an excuse to stay home, why would you ever go back? If it's all being streamed, you can rationalize and say, I'm getting everything I got before. Well, maybe that's true, but you can't get this. The difference of teaching high school online and in person, I hated online. Let me rephrase it. I detested online because you need the face. If I'm gonna rag on some kid, I need to be able to see him in the face and say, hey, ugly. So, in the name of Jesus. Jesus loves you, no one else does.
I just hope it hasn't changed.
Remember, the Spirit of God's doing His thing. So, we are encouraged. It just might look differently. Let's pray and get out of here. People are working around us. Father, thank you for time together. Thank you that we have been changed into the image of Christ, and now we're becoming like Christ in how we act. So move in our hearts. This word swag has become our word. So however we define it, may it be a swag that looks like Jesus. We do think for this congregation and its ministry, we look at this school and all the hundreds of parents that are here and figuring out how we even connect with them. And maybe as Jary says, bringing people that we know and then going out, whatever it takes. You've put this group here, and so do your thing. Be with Kent as he preaches, with the singing. Each person that is there this morning, there by divine appointment. And so move in their hearts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.